Hello and welcome to Reflections. I am Rom Gayoso, your host. Today, our topic is the future of politics, and I have the right person to talk to us about that, Mike Laub. First and foremost, thank you so very much for being here with me and my guest. I know your time is very important, and I'm the guy who will make sure it is invested wisely. Remember, if you're watching this show via Futures Television, the home of the future on television, or listening to the show via Radio Futures, the wave of the future on radio, you too can be part of the conversation. Please join us in our YouTube channel, and that is IMCI Magazine, where we continue to chat about the topic of the day. Well, let's get going. So, my guest today is Mike Laub. He is dedicated to see our political process improve, and he has many ideas in how to get us there. In the talk today, we will start in the present and discuss a little bit of what's going on. Then, what we'll do is we're going to move into the future and imagine some ways to make the political process less conflictive and more objective. Well, without further ado, let's welcome Mike to the show. Hi, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
How wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for being here. And I have to start from the beginning. So, Mike, tell me a little bit about your passions. Why are you passionate about politics?
Well, thank you. I'm passionate about politics because I've seen myself change quite often, and both politically and religiously. Started my life one way and then kind of jumped to the other extreme. And in being so convinced that I was right, and then changing my mind over time, obviously you realize that your initial beliefs, you run into concepts such as confirmation bias, cognitive inertia, and just being exposed to some of these ideas just really helped me see kind of a sickness in our society where so many of us are having cognitive biases and don't even see it in our lives. And our political debates are all built upon appeals to emotion, and just the more you kind of learn about our consciousness and our how we make decisions, the more you see how that doesn't really work with how we're making political decisions now. And so it's just something that I'm interested in and passionate about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned, the issue of bias. So unfortunately, we do have selective attention. But one problem that I see that we don't pay much attention to bias, and some people don't even realize we're biased. So we think something is true, and then we only look at the environment for things that will reinforce that belief that something is true, and we conveniently ignore the things that point out to the otherwise. No, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And we, through our selective attention, and as you explain, through our bias, we tends to only look at the things that reinforce our beliefs, which kind of brings me to the next question. So I want to talk to you a little bit about polarization, really. So, and that's the word of the politics today. There's so much polarization, but I don't really remember that much growing up. I think we used to say not so far here, not so far there, live and let live, and things like this. So polarization, how did we get here?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question, and I do appreciate your comments about bias and how the bias can lead us to being polarized, and definitely stop me if I'm being too philosophical. But I think that this kind of these concepts kind of lay a groundwork for some concrete solutions that I see in the future. But my concern now is kind of a cynical approach to manipulation and relativistic approaches to truth in our culture. So kids are told to spend their lives, they're not told to spend their lives in humble pursuits of truth. They're given an article to read in school and told to start producing propaganda to either defend one side or the other. And to me, it's the whole clean slate approach where everyone is supposed to find their own truth. And you kind of contrast that with the concept in science where it's standing on the shoulders of giants and kind of getting your data to fit in with the rest of the data around you. And kids are told that they are entitled to persuade people, before really spending much time in becoming a subject matter expert. And I know that when I was young, I was taught something called the persuasive essay format. I don't know if you remember hearing much about that. When you were young, how to write a persuasive essay. But my kids all learned it. And I think that it's just teaching our children to produce propaganda. They're told to pick a side and to choose arguments that support your side. And, you're not even really supposed to address the counter evidence. And worse, in the conclusion, if you Google persuasive essay format, you'll see many outlines of how you're supposed to do it. And many of these outlines say that you're supposed to point out potential benefits to the reader if they agree with you. And then you're supposed to provide a call to action. And first of all, scientists and judges, they're not supposed to pick a side. They're supposed to follow the evidence. And I don't know if you watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, but there's a very memorable guy in it. And he has thick glasses and dreadlocks. And he said, we've created a generation of people where the very meaning of communication and culture is manipulation. We've put deceit and sneakiness at the absolute center of everything we do. And, I think that gets back to what you were saying about bias. When you pick a side, it's very hard because of cognitive inertia to stop moving in that direction. You go left and you get inertia behind you, kind of pushing you that way. And like you said, once you pick a side, there's an excellent book called Righteous Minds by Jonathan Haidt. I highly recommend it. But it explains how, just like you said, you're not really looking for the truth. You're looking for justification of what you want to believe. But with a persuasive,
I wanted to
oh
say
yeah,
that
please.
in a little bit longer. So I remember, the persuasive essays and all, but the first step was looking for information, which you described as becoming an expert. But we would have to understand the basics before we went out and started making arguments for or against or something like that. It looks like people are skipping the understand the basics or looking for the facts and going, as you mentioned, straight to the propaganda machine. So you can convince someone and say, well, we skip a step, right? What about as you explained very well, looking for facts and fact finding first, and having some kind of a common basic understanding, right? We skip the step, and then we arrive in the situation where it becomes, we're teaching propaganda to people, and then we're surprised that when they leave the school, they're doing what? More propaganda. That's what they were taught, right?
That's exactly what was in the back of my mind is the word propaganda. And you're right. There are wonderful teachers that, say that you should do the research correctly. And what I was just not warned as a child when I was deciding what to believe religiously was all of these warnings about how you can be controlled and manipulated, and how you can control and manipulate yourself. And we have warning signs on cigarettes packages and alcohol, but I imagine there are good teachers that give warnings on confirmation bias and choosing sides, and good teachers do give warnings, but you can corrupt your own mind if you're not careful. And the devil truly is in the details and in how that process works.
Well, I remember if I remember correctly. So actually, the tobacco companies paid for the studies that actually said that tobacco is not really any damaging to your health. So for 40 or 50 years, they quote built their own version of the truth. And so when we realize, well, perhaps the person paying for those things is the direct beneficiary of the results of the study, perhaps that's not so kosher after all.
Yeah, it's
So
follow the money and do your own research. And once you've kind of adopted a political philosophy, you don't even realize that you're kind of um, being manipulated, and that you're manipulating yourself, and it feels like it's a true part of yourself. um, but truth has to be integrated with the other truths. But anyways,
no, that's a good point.
yeah.
So I have a different kind of question here. So Bazir, right? He wants to know a little bit about critical thinking skills. So how can citizens build critical thinking skills? Also at the policy level, what about any code of ethics? Is there any? I did not know that. And accountability at the policy level.
Well,
So Bazir, thank you for your
unfortunately,
question.
yeah, thank you. That is a great question. Uh, Unfortunately, when I read Jonathan Haidt's A Righteous Mind, he says that building critical thinking in individuals is almost a lost cause. It's hopeless. And I don't want to discourage you, but even people that know about confirmation bias and people that know about all of these things, they are unable to remove bias from their own lives. And so, the book Righteous Minds, it tells you that the only hope is dialogue and getting groups together. And you have your own biases, and you can try your best to remove them. But like Ram said, the only solution is going back to the old days where we spoke with each other and we had conversations and friends on the other side, and we as a community can reach. I'm not sure what was the question about. uh, how do you combat how do you get critical thinking skills?
Yeah, go
I
back
think,
to building critical thinking skills, because I think what Bazir is trying to say, well, if we had those, right, if we from
yeah.
the get-go, if we had somewhat more of a maybe if the education process was built in a way, so instead of trying to do the propaganda stuff, if we're focusing on building critical thinking skills and teaching people how to become more critical, not just to accept things as facts, but rather to investigate and have that curiosity in mind, perhaps we would be in a different situation, would we not?
Correct. And we can try to do the best we can as individuals, but we also need to join groups of people with diverse opinions and hear from both sides. And you can do your best, but that's ultimately where I think the solution comes.
And so the giving and taking of information, and I think what you described is so important. So, and I guess maybe I'm not being nostalgic by any stretch of the imagination, but we used to have like salons where we would get
Yeah.
together, and those were free things, right? So we would talk about the book, and someone would have a one opinion about a book, and one would have a completely opposite opinion. But there was this kind of dialogue where we got together, and at some point in time, at the beginning of the internet, we had that healthy debate where we could hold talks and conversations with people who have diametrically opposed views of what you do. But again, the real process is you don't have to espouse their views in order to discuss them. We can discuss opposing views without subscribing to them, can we not?
Yeah, the goal is to burst confirmation or bubbles or echo chambers. And I'm old enough that I remember when the internet was first being constructed, that we all thought that it would help everything, that people would learn to understand each other. There was lots of optimism when the internet was being built, and I remember thinking that we would link all of our arguments, and we would build a Socratic website where you saw where um, Nietzsche agreed with Socrates, and you would click on a statement by Socrates, and you would see all of the people who agreed and all of the people who disagreed, and we would link all of our arguments in such a way that it wasn't attention span based, but it was pros and cons. And I honestly remember thinking that the internet was going to solve a lot of these problems of people misunderstanding each other, and it was going to get people from the other side of the world to come together and solve all their problems. But obviously we see, if you've watched the Social Dilemma, that's not how the internet has been designed so far. And there's promises of Web 2.0 and 3.0, and that it's going to change in the future, and that's really what I'm excited about.
Yeah, those are great things. So maybe going back, to Brazil's point, maybe we should go back to doing some of those things, and maybe like pros and cons and things like, on the left column, on the right column, why, in favor or against, and things like this. But perhaps if we taught those simple tricks or techniques to our youngsters, they would be more inclined to be more critical, and as you explain, at least acknowledging our biases. So when we do write papers, right, we are supposed to disclose our own biases, so that this is how we see the world, and that's not necessarily good or bad. It's just this is how you see the world. That's we're all influenced by culture, by education, by religion, and things like this. But because we see that way, and we're able to understand we see it this way, we can also understand that somebody else from a different culture, from a different religion, from different political perspective or spectrum would see it differently. And I think that's the beauty of what you try to explain here, which is if we kind of get together, and the internet is a beautiful tool, it could facilitate the dialogue. Actually, that's kind of where I wanted to go next. So instead of dialogue, we end up shouting at each other. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, at some point in time, we lost the civility, right? So what can we do in order to get the civility back to the political discourse? Nowadays, it's more about personal attacks, and you hear very little about ideas or how we're going to get ahead. So how do we get back to a civil political discourse?
Yeah, that's really the question, And so I think the insults only work when you view yourself as a warrior in an ideological battle, or when everyone views themselves as salespeople using the persuasive essay format. Or personal attacks only work when your goal is to make the opposite side look foolish. And so the only way to stop the insults is to create political parties that don't make enemies of each other. So I'm no longer religious, but the Bible says that in the last days that people will accept arbitration. And it actually uses the word arbitration. And it says they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And so arbitration and the cessation of ideological battles are what millions of people have longed for, for thousands of years. And Julia Galef expressed this desire much better than I could in a TED Talk, where she talked about the difference between a scout versus the warrior mindset. And, a scout is looking for information and trying to see those pros and cons and reasons to agree and disagree, where, obviously a warrior is enlisted on one side and then down in the dirt and, willing to sacrifice, the present for, a glorious future. But we've known what makes people intelligent and stupid politically for thousands of years. Lady Justice is shown with a scale because she looks at both sides of an argument. She is blindfolded to represent that, we must control our bias and emotional preference for either side and look for, like you've used the word earlier on, objective facts when weighing the evidence. But this concept it's much older. Lady Justice traces her roots back to the goddess Maat, Maat, the Egyptian goddess Maat, who also used scales to understand both sides of an issue. So, but having individuals rediscover the secret to wisdom and looking at both sides isn't working. We've known, smart people have been aware that that's the solution for thousands of years, but we find ourselves still in these ideological battles, and we're making the same arguments over and over again on Twitter, on Facebook. It's just countless repetition, and we're not learning, and we're not growing, and we're devolving. We things that our ancestors understood aren't generally being practiced by common people. We need institutions dedicated to arbitration, debate, and weighing cost, benefits, and risk. And we must build algorithms in software that promote reason, logic, and evidence. And the insults and the personal attacks won't stop until we create a different game and we get people to play a different game. And, and it's got to be more than just, the people in ivory towers who are reading books and sharing ideas about books already. I mean, that's been going on for thousands of years, but, we're kind of preaching, this, hey, you need to fit your ideas into the weight of evidence. But, you have politicians doing, speeches and conventions, and, they come to stadiums and they preach, you're fine how you are, come in all your, come as you are. And we don't need to, be like those nerdy people that, sit around and look at both sides. We just need your energy and enthusiasm, and what I'm hoping for is that we can match that level of involvement, and that we can get people to come and participate, but to fit their arguments within logic and reason and pros and cons. And it needs to be more than just people who are interested in books and interested in sharing ideas. But I think we need to make it open to everyone on the internet. And I think that that's really what we need to do, is we need to, yes, involve people in the design of, these types of websites or these types of new political parties that try to use conflict resolution. But we need to make it for everyone to participate with direct democratic participation. But I think that's kind of what we need to do to make things more civil.
Okay, well, a lot of things to talk about. So let's go back to, you are really an expert in conflict resolution techniques, right? So
Yes.
could we leverage those skills to help us foster a more objective political dialogue? It seems like, it's really subjective and opinion based as opposed to fact finding. So in your experience, in your conflict resolution, could we apply some of those techniques and help us get to a better place here?
Yes, thanks for the kind words. I do believe, that we could, and that's my main objective at this point. Is I think we can design websites that use, algorithms, which are just simple procedures, and we can use the procedures taught by arbitration, moderation, and conflict resolution. But I don't want it to sound super complex. I think any computer programmer or web designer who reads a book like this is a book called Getting to Yes. And a little bit about the book. Its subtitle is Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. And it was written by the founders of the Harvard Negotiation Project. So these are the people that teach the State Department how to negotiate international conflicts. But if a computer programmer or web designer were to read this book, they would see a suggestion. And one of the maybe 20 suggestions in this book is to focus on interests, not positions. So let's say a web designer wanted to create a new political party that uses a conflict resolution website to make decisions. And an interest of the pro-choice movement when it comes to abortion is self-determination and freedom from government meddling. So the web designer would encourage this to be identified as a shared interest between the two sides, because freedom is a motivator that is often expressed by pro-life conservatives. Freedom from government meddling, but the web designer would also allow opposing interests to be identified between the two sides. So pro-life advocates want life to be sacralized. And when something is sacred, it becomes an absolute that is outside of practical considerations. And so the desire for life to be sacred and the need to have commitments outside of practical consideration is a strong motivator for those within the pro-life camp. But it's a motivation that remains hidden to those who are not explicitly trying to understand the interest of the other side. Again, a technique taught in conflict resolution is to not bargain over position, not say, oh, I need this law passed, and oh no, I don't want this law passed, and this law is good, no, this law is bad. That just having those surface arguments is getting us nowhere. And a simple website where people on each side were able to identify their interest and their motivation and why they choose their side, and it focused on motivation instead of just their position, would uncover their hidden motivations. So everyone would benefit if we could address these hidden motivations. Perhaps the desire for rules that are never broken should be balanced, by times when Jesus or prophets set aside rigid laws to serve practical consideration. And so, someone who's trying to influence a strong pro-life person needs to understand all of these complexities. It doesn't mean that we just need to shout louder or band together and make memes about how stupid the other side is. We really need to focus more. And I think any computer programmer or web designer who sat down with this book could design a website that does a much better job than Twitter or Facebook or Democrats.org or Republicans.com or Republicans.org. So that's kind of my whole thesis is that we can integrate the techniques of conflict resolution into a web design or into a political party that uses democratic contributions to make decisions. So this would just be a new political party, and we would keep our government exactly how it is, but representatives would promise to show their math and say why they voted to support or oppose a different belief. And they could do that however they wanted, but they could identify the outcomes of online debates, or they could identify all sorts of different things where they show their math and what caused them to make a decision. And that's kind of what I'm trying to push as an idea.
So Berser actually helps us think, we have a problem. The algorithms usually, can't tell a traffic light or a lion from a cat. So what are you trying to say is therefore we would kind of go back to the basics and show. So let's go back to your example of the pro-life debate. So we would focus on the key issues, but something that we all agree. So let's start with freedom, right? We want freedom from government and start from there. And then we could perhaps branch, this versus that, or that versus this, and show the opposing views without the conflict, but rather in a more objective manner. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely think Basir's comments, and I'm definitely not talking about artificial intelligence, where they're trying to see a traffic light from a cat. And I'm using the term algorithm to identify a step-by-step procedure. And so democracy is an algorithm. it's ruled by the people. And so the making a cake is an algorithm. First you get out the eggs, you crack the eggs, you stir the eggs, and so what I'm saying is a process party. And I actually do not like artificial intelligence. What I believe is collective intelligence. And so I think Wikipedia is a collective intelligence. It's just a group effort, and it's an organized group effort in that it focuses people's attention on one thing at a time. So there's a Wikipedia page about the San Francisco Gate Bridge, and it focuses everyone's attention on that one thing. And there's the history of the bridge. There's a remodel effort, and that's kind of what I'm hoping we can do in and that's what I mean by algorithms, is just that we use processes like trying to figure out what the motivation is for each side, and that's just a process. And I definitely didn't, Rom. I'm not. I don't think I did a great job of fully understanding your question, but I'm hoping that so far
No,
that
you did. No, so I think it's kind of going back to the the basics, and if we find the commonality and we start from, let's say, the value of freedom, right? So if we
Mhm.
start with the commonality, then the left will say something, the right will say something else. But perhaps people from both sides of the debate who are in favor or against, so who are pro-life or pro-choice, if we can agree on the basic of freedom, right? So freedom from government influence or something like that. So some kind of a basic understanding. Then, well, we all agree to that. If we all agree to that, then I think there is a possibility that there's going to be civil debate or civil discourse in terms of, okay, well, if we start from here, right, and where do we get from here? But at least there's some kind of a common ground, as opposed to just opposing sides that actually don't want to talk. They just want to shout at each other, right?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to get the two sides at least understanding each other, because when we don't understand each other, and when we don't understand what motivates each other, our imagination fills in the blanks. They do this because they're evil. They do this because if we don't understand them, we're going to make up accusations. We do this, their motivation, we always assume the worst. And and so abortion is the very worst topic to bring for me to have brought up, because there are more simple issues that I hope that we would address first with this um, online cost benefit analysis, pro con, uh, arbitrated um, uh, conflict resolution website.
Also,
Uh,
but so there is a beginning. So with technology, and as you mentioned, maybe we could use the collective intelligence and fish from it. So let's say, cost benefit analysis of, creating another school voucher or something like that, where we could talk in
yes,
objective terms that would result in this, that would result in that. And I kind of feel that we need that kind of a solution. Let me share with you an example. So I'm an economist, right?
yes,
And one of my former neighbors, she ran the only teen pregnancy program left in the county. There were three; they were cut down to one. And she
yes,
asked me to help her make the case for budget. I said, "Well, easy. Well, an economist, right?" So
yeah,
instead of talking about people, because if I go that way, people will shut out. I said, "We'll talk about cost benefit." And I
yes,
said, well, there are two choices here. You can look at this person, a pregnant teenager, right? And she will become one of two things: a cost or a taxpayer, right?
yes,
If we kick her out of school and she doesn't graduate, she will become a dependent on social services.
yes,
Or she will pay taxes and
yes,
she will contribute to society. So which one should we go? Should we
yeah,
help her graduate and become
yeah.
a taxpayer, or should we kick her out and let her become a cost? And the answer was, kick her out, let her become a cost, because if a pregnant teen is walking around, other teens will become pregnant. And then I said, well, look, as far as I remember, you can't just look. You don't get pregnant by looking. You have to do something
Yeah.
more. But I think a solution like what you're trying to say, right? If we could have some sort of using the collective intelligence to share, right? Maybe we would have come at different conclusions, or we would have understood, well, yeah, perhaps you don't want to see a pregnant teenager walking around in the high school, but it's a matter of fact, she does exist. So how do we deal with her? Do we embrace her and make it a welcoming place so that she will feel valued and she will grow up, or do we exclude her? And I think
Exactly. And
sharing of information is that, isn't it?
yeah, and Rom, anytime there's something new, everyone always says, "Well, this isn't going to solve all your problems," and I don't see this as solving all of our problems. These issues have existed since we came out of the trees, but the goal is to have more order in the conversation and to not have to recreate these arguments from scratch every single day on Twitter. Why do we have to recreate this argument on these arguments on Twitter every single day? Why don't we organize them by topic so that we can continually refine them and continually evaluate all of their sub arguments and link everything together in a process that promotes quality? And again, I don't think it's going to solve all of our problems, but all I'm asking for is more order in our conversation. You have a belief at the top of a page. You have reasons to agree or disagree that belief is true. And true can be free from logical error, and true can also mean verified. So, and then you can have reasons to agree or disagree that argument is important. And as an economist, you know that something can be important if it has significant cost or significant benefits. And so you can have the significance or the amount of cost from a quantitative standpoint, but you can also have a confidence. You can have arguments about the likelihood of a cost or benefit. And I don't know if you're familiar with the old tale that the Earth stands on top of turtles. And there was a question, what's beneath the turtle? Well, they just said turtles. And then someone said, what's beneath those? And so this is an ancient belief on, how is the world sustained and created? And, some people said that Atlas held up the earth, but I can't remember which community thought that the earth was supported by turtles. And the question was, what's beneath all of the turtles? And they said more turtles. And that's kind of what I want is arguments, is, there's costs and benefits, and you have arguments that a cost is likely, and then you have arguments that a cost is more or less significant, and then reasons to agree or disagree with each of those beliefs. And you have scores for each argument and conclusion scores built on the strength of those argument scores. And so if you weaken an argument, it should automatically weaken all conclusions built on that argument. So just take, for instance, global warming. If we strengthen the belief that global warming is caused by human CO2 emissions, then it should automatically strengthen all beliefs built on that. And so that's kind of the world that I believe we will develop in the future, and that I'm very mad that we haven't developed yet.
So I want to change subjects a little bit. So, another important point is finding ways to foster more inclusiveness in the political process. So how can
Yes.
we bring more voices into the political discussion?
Yes, that's a great question. And if you read this book, Getting to Yes, it does focus on that. it says that you need a group that's diverse enough that you hear all of the different perspectives, but it needs to be small enough that everyone can participate. And if you look over in Europe, you can see that there are political parties that are dedicated to citizens' juries or citizens' assemblies. And that's where you put everyone together in a gymnasium and you have them kind of talk through the issues. You have randomly assigned citizens. But I think that those are great efforts, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I believe in a Wikipedia approach to politics, that we need to outline all of the costs and the benefits, and anyone should be able to go and add a reason that a certain cost is more important. That so cost can be associated with someone's needs or interest, and those needs and interests can be associated with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so those can be more or less important. We need food, water, and air, and those are the very most important things that we need. And so cost or benefits that give people the ability to obtain food or water or air might be more important from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs standpoint than some other costs or benefits. And all I want is arguments all the way down, pro and con arguments. And I think that if we just accomplish that one thing, having pro and con arguments on the same page, we're so much better than the Republican and Democrat parties. It's to me a shame that a political party that's dedicated to democracy is less democratic than Wikipedia. Wikipedia allows anyone to go in and contribute, but not everyone can contribute to the Democrats.org website, and not everyone can contribute to the Republican websites. And they have different facts on their website, and they don't speak the same language. They don't share facts. I'm going to gather all of the facts that support my conclusions, and you're going to gather all of the facts that support your conclusions. And we're not really going to acknowledge each other's facts. And that, to me, is the problem. But to address your question about inclusion, I just say to everyone out there, come as you are and participate in this process. Don't just bring your anger. Don't just bring your hatred. Don't bring your self-righteousness, but clean yourself of those things first. But definitely come. Everyone is welcome. And if you can fit into the process that looks at reason, you're welcome. And so everyone is welcome if they follow the rules of the website.
Now, one thing is we try to become more inclusive, but the young people look at us, right, and say, and if we go back through history, like Plato, right? In Athens, there were more slaves than there were people, free people, right? Mm. So slaveholder, right? Benjamin Franklin, slaveholder, yes. Right? So yes. Do as I say, don't do as I do. How do we? How do we get younger people excited about a process if they look at us and say, well, you fools, you're all talk, you don't do. So do you think that promoting more of the fact sharing will help people become more enthusiastic or want them to join in the debate? How can we get them excited about joining in the debate?
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point that we need to reach out and be inclusive, and we need to not be hypocrites. And I think there's all sorts of things that we could do on a website, and I don't want to be the person that dictates about how every decision is made, but I definitely agree with you that I think that that's important, and that we can avoid being hypocrites, and we can reach out and include everyone.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is we go around when we don't like something, we go around and redistrict, right? Let's redraw the lines. We don't like the
Yeah.
outcome of the vote, or we don't like the demographics. So if you look at the redistricting maps, I mean, they don't look like natural maps. Really, it looks like someone went around and moved this thing here, moved this. So how can we avoid those things? I mean, is it truly representative if I go on a street by street basis and pick the street versus the other? How could we arrive at some sort of an idea where we are truly inclusive, but we are also not gerrymandering or trying to redistrict every election so that we get what we want?
Yeah, I I think that we need to make our decisions based on the best available evidence. And so I'm not necessarily interested in what everyone's beliefs are. I'm interested in what evidence you can bring to support your belief. And I know that that sounds harsh, but I think that um, it's the ultimate kindness that we're going to have a society that is ran by reason, and it definitely doesn't seem reasonable to select representatives in a unfair way. That, you know, I believe that democracy and representation and true democracy, which is representing the community the way the community really looks, is a value. And to me, that's an algorithm. The separation of powers is an algorithm. And I think debate is an algorithm. And our founding fathers told us not to create political parties. Both, George Washington and John Adams. Uh, John Adams, one of the, few founding fathers that, um, you know, was opposed to, opposed to slavery, and you know, but they did warn us to not form political parties, and even Benjamin Franklin, he warned us. He tried starting a virtue party, and he's not super well associated with virtue, but he used it's kind of a classic Greek term of virtue, which is effective. He wanted to start something close to effective. You've heard of effective altruism, where you judge your policy, not by stories, but by the outcome using scientific methods, and that's what I believe in, and I hope that kind of answers your questions.
No, it's a very different view of the world, and that's why we're having this conversation. So,
Yeah.
and I think it's important that we highlight. So, this is the situation we are in today, but it doesn't have to be, right?
Mhm.
If we sit down as a collective and decide that's not very beneficial, or maybe we should either look at fact finding or look at virtues and things like that. I mean, there are several sites out over there that say fact finding, but after every single speech by one side or the other, if you go to the site, about half of the things that were said were not true or factual
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
either. Some saying, my gosh, what have we become? Again, it's going back to the idea of subjectivism and being opinionated as opposed to looking for ways to share facts and information. So perhaps if we were to promote a view of the world that it's sharing, more sharing, as you identified, and try to identify, those are the things, quote, we think, are true, or we hold are true, and start from there. Perhaps we'll have a better shot at, controlling the polarization, perhaps going away from this obnoxious political debate and going back to policies. So which policies will benefit us better, this policy or the other policy? But again, it's
Yeah.
just a thought. But so what other issues? I mean, you named quite a few, but in the future, what other issues do you think we need to tackle so that we have a healthy and well functioning society?
Yeah. Well, and I do think that uh, the issues of inclusion and obtaining the insights from more people is something that this can address. It, a lot of, everyday people in the country are talked about, and politicians try to use them, but they often don't have a direct voice, and that's what I think that this direct participation democracy could do. Is what do the people want, and let them speak for themselves. We don't have to speak for them. We don't have to try to guess at their motives. This online, Wikipedia isn't focused on politics or arguments or reasons to agree or disagree or interest. It's just focused on telling you facts about a bridge or some fancy boat, or it's just an encyclopedia. But a political version of Wikipedia, where you have people who in a country, citizens that have been underrepresented, they can go on the website and directly say what they want and what they need, what their interests are. And so I do think that is how we can, move to the future, is by letting people have a voice. And right now they don't have a voice. I mean, on Twitter or Wikipedia, having money, having power, having a PhD exposes you to more influence. There's secret hidden algorithms on Twitter and Facebook, and you meet powerful friends at expensive colleges. And all of these things help you have more influence in an artificial intelligence world. But having a direct participation world where individuals can go on and explain what they want and what they need, or they can post reasons to agree or disagree directly without being filtered out by, Trump has $1 billion and he can buy an audience, and he can buy Twitter feeds and Twitter posts, and he can, Twitter and all of Facebook and all of these so-called democratic movements are up for sale. But Wikipedia is not up for sale. It's a direct participation website. And I think that we can learn a lot from them on how to, we know that in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party, that money buys influence, contributions buy influence. And I think that we give voice to citizens that have typically been left out of the conversation by letting them directly participate.
Yeah, we just had a comment about, we talked about redistricting. So gerrymandering is practices by both parties, but the outcome may not be what was expected. So when that happens, you just go around and redistrict again, right? What do you do?
Yeah, I love intelligence squared debate, where they have kind of arguments from both sides, and they give each side 15 minutes, and they have a vote before and after. And they did talk about redistricting, but then opponents said that sometimes the designers of gerrymandering don't actually always get their way, and so, but it's interesting.
Okay. You know what? I think we have a long way to go, but I kind of like your, let's have this Wikipedia out there, so that at least we or adopt this political Wikipedia, so that we can have this kind of debate. But we are talking about a non-partisan political society, probably, right? So we go back to the idea of virtual. I mean, Ben Franklin's idea of virtual. How would that work?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Here in America, it's very hard for us to imagine something different than what we have. But over in other countries, there are political parties dedicated to processes. And like I said, there's citizen juries, and there's political parties dedicated to direct democracy. And And the Republican and Democrat parties are named after processes. They're not named after we're the small government party or we're the big government party. Those are just political um, uh, platforms. But your party, the party is really named after the process of democracy or the process of representation. And what I really want to be is a political party that's dedicated to debate and putting ideas through a survival of the fittest death match. And the Constitution was designed for debate. We're supposed to take people and shove them in the same room together and have them debate the issues, but they're not debating each other. And so that's what I think is lacking from our current politics is debate. It's all just a performative act, and you have people in a room by themselves giving speeches to no one, but the only speech they're giving a speech to is C-SPAN. And our political rooms of debate are just places for grandstanding and giving speeches. And giving speeches to each other was not the purpose of bringing our politicians all together and putting them in the same room. And so saying that our Constitution is no longer working is like saying that if you put sand in your engine and being frustrated that it's not working. Our Constitution isn't working because our political parties don't debate each other. They don't bring real, honest data to be shared or to be evaluated. All they do is a performance for cameras. And so that's what I'm trying to address is, I believe in democracy, I believe in representation, and I believe in debate. And I think we need a political party that also believes in real, honest, open debate. And you couldn't shove the whole country in the same room so that we could all debate the same issue when the Constitution was founded. But limitation of space and time are no longer a consideration. We can leverage the intelligence and the attention span and the time of everyone in this country. And, I think we start with economists and people that have PhDs, and we do cost benefit analysis, and we import them from Stanford and Harvard and all of our leading institutions. But you allow citizens to post reasons to agree or disagree, and you allow them to interact with the real data that is behind pros and cons and evidence and counter evidence. And you, if nothing else, allow them to upvote and downvote and see where the strongest pro arguments and the strongest con arguments are. And so there are examples of process parties. I think the Republican Party should be dedicated to improving representation. I think the Democratic Party should be dedicated to improving direct democracy. Or at least I'm not a big fan of direct democracy. I don't think we all have the attention span to vote on every single issue, but the people with expertise and attention span willing to read all of the pros and cons can contribute to areas of their interest. And so I think that a party named after democracy should be dedicated at least to direct participation.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation today. I want to thank, Mike Laub for, so much for your time today. The person who wants to take us away from reality TV politics and into real truth politics. So we're really just scratching the surface here. We can certainly continue the conversation, but I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. So before we go, let me say a few words about the upcoming shows. We just had a talk with Jerome Glenn that is being televised. We will continue to work on technology, metaverse, sustainability, several key events coming up. Institute of Competitive Intelligence from Frankfurt and Frost and Sullivan that we will be covering. Again, I just wanted to thank you guys so much for being here with me, my guest Mike Laub today. Please continue to share your thoughts and your ideas, and you can reach out to me, the magazine, via Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube. And again, thank you so much for your being here with me and Mike Laub today. And I see you next time in another edition of Reflections. I will leave you for institutional message. Thank you.